morning to all. On behalf of the Center for Economic and Social Studies and on my own behalf, I extend a warm welcome to all faculty, staff, research scholars, students to this meeting remembering Shri B.P.R. Vithal, commemorating his 97th birth anniversary. I extend a warm welcome to Dr. Pinaki Chakraborthy, who will be the chief guest for today's occasion. I extend a warm welcome to Dr. C. Ram Manohar Reddy, who is also attending online. Today we are celebrating the 97th birth anniversary of Shri B.P.R. Vithal. And Dr. Pinaki Chakraborthy will be talking on issues before the 16th Finance Commission of India, fiscal balance, fund flow, and key fiscal challenges. Before we start proceedings, we will pay our floral tributes to Shri B.P.R. Vithal and then start our proceedings. For the benefit of our PhD school scholars and students and remembering Shri B.P.R. Vithal, it's also important for us to know about our founder. Shri B.P.R. Vithal is the founder and first chairman of the Center for Economic and Social Studies, and he positioned the institute, our center, as an autonomous national institution, providing a platform between academicians and policymakers. I think it is for the benefit of our scholars that they know what was the context in which and the underlying thinking and how the institute has been founded. The institute this has been founded, and the social science research at that time was concentrated in Delhi and revolved around macroeconomic issues. It was felt that research around social sciences need to be decentralized and closer to the ground realities. And research institutes by then were set up in other states of Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Karnataka. Vithal sir was keen that the institution should be fully funded by the government, but also to be autonomous, working on similar lines for the state government, to be a think tank contributing to policy making of the state, as similar to that of the Planning Commission working for Government of India. So he has taken the initiative to set up the center along with other founder members, Dr. G. Ram Reddy, Vice Chancellor, Usmania University, Dr. S.K. Rao, DG NIRD, and Professor C.H. Hanumantarao, at that time Director, Institute of Economic Growth, and Dr. Wahiduddin Khan, who later became the first director of the center in 1982. So the center was formally established on 26th February 1980. To give a brief description of B.P.R.'s education and his other career, Shri B.P.R. Vithal was educated at Madrasa-e-Aliyah High School, Hyderabad. And in 1942, he quit his undergraduate studies at Nizam College, attended the Quit India session of the Indian National Congress in Mumbai, and participated in the national movement. He graduated from Madras Christian College with BSc in chemistry he joined the Hyderabad Civil Service in 1949 and qualified for the IAS in 1950. B.P.R. Vithal served as a Planning and Finance Department, Government of Andhra Pradesh, for a continuous period of 13 years during 1969 to 1982 as Secretary and Principal Secretary. He was Deputy Chairman, Andhra Pradesh State Planning Board and member of 10th Finance Commission. He was also Chairman, Expenditure Commission, Government of Kerala. He had a brief stint at the International Monetary Fund as fiscal advisor to the governments of Sudan and Malawi. He was a member of the Ken Raj Committee on Taxation of Agricultural Income, Government of India in 1969. Shri Vithal Garu also was instrumental in establishing and strengthening the Department of Economics at Usmania University. B.P.R. Vithal has many publications to his credit, prominent among which are A State in Periodic Crisis, Andhra Pradesh. This was authored in 2012. And In Retrospect, a Miscellany in 2012. And Gadgil Formula for Allocation of Central Assistance for State Plans in 2002. Fiscal Federalism in India in 2001. His research paper titled The Telangana Surpluses, a Case Study, played an influential role in shaping the demand for a separate state of Telangana. He worked on spatial planning, and this had worked. A team at CESS in the beginning had worked on preparing the planning atlas of Andhra Pradesh. Vithal sir was continuously interacting with faculty in the areas of their work. He used to send brief notes reflecting his own experience and thoughts, which was helpful to know the historical context of the state, of the issue. That way, he was involved in the research activities of the institute till his last days also. We once again remember Shri B.P.R. Vithal on this occasion, on his 97th birth anniversary. And I thank Dr. Pinaki Chakraborthy for accepting in a short time to be the chief guest and to talk on the issues before the 16th Finance Commission of India, fiscal balance, fund flow, and key fiscal challenges. Dr. Pinaki Chakraborthy is presently visiting distinguished professor at NIPFP and vice chairman of the Institute of Development Studies, Jaipur. Prior to this, he was director and professor at the NIPFP and also economic advisor to the 14th Finance Commission of India. He served as member advisory council to the 15th Finance Commission of India and member secretary committee on fiscal statistics appointed by the National Statistics Commission and many other distinguished positions. He also testified before the Select Committee of the Upper House of India Parliament in June 2015 on the Constitution Amendment Bill on GST. I think that was his contribution. His book titled GST in India, A Simple Tax in a Complex Federal System was published by Orient Black Swan in 2019. He has also researched extensively on the decentralization and development of states in India. And he has co-authored 2 books on this state-level reforms, growth and development in Indian states, published by the Oxford University Press. And also Social Sector in a Decentralized Economy, India in the Era of Globalization, published by the Cambridge University Press. We are thankful to you again for accepting to make this presentation. Now I invite Dr. Pinaki Chakraborthy to make his presentation. What do you?
Thank you, Dr. Revathi, for this very kind and generous introduction and this invitation. I am going to speak today on issues before the 16th Finance Commission. These are some thoughts that I put together in the form of a presentation. So if there are any questions or comments, you can ask me at the end. But if there are any clarification questions you may have, you can always ask. And in between the lecture also. So I'm delighted to be here. And again, thank you for asking me to speak today on the occasion of remembering the birth anniversary of Shri B.P.R. Vithal. I met him twice in my life in Hyderabad. And discussed with him on issues related to fiscal federalism. And I actually prepared a couple of very short notes. And Dr. Revathi was mentioning about his, he commenting on notes and writing short notes and giving very incisive, comments on issues. So we had an insightful discussion on the elimination of plan and non-plan distinction and on its impact on public financial management. That was the first time I met, but I have read extensively his work, particularly his work on federalism, on planning, on Gadgil formula. Hear from my friends on his contribution to the 10th Finance Commission Award, where we moved from tax-specific share to the sharing of the entire tax revenue of the Union government. So these are some of the initial thoughts I had about when I was asked to give this lecture. So I thought it will be appropriate if I speak on issues before the 16th Finance Commission today, because the commission is already in office and they're working on certain issues. And I wanted to highlight today what are the key issues that I think are important in the present context. So let me start the presentation. The title of the presentation is Issues Before the 16th Finance Commission of India: Fiscal Balance, Fiscal Space, Fund Flow, and Subnational Fiscal Risk. I structured this presentation in 5 broad heads. One is, about macroeconomic uncertainty and post-COVID fiscal balance at the subnational level in India. There are off-budget fiscal risk, and off-budget fiscal risk are becoming a major concern. So I'll talk briefly about off-budget fiscal risk and fiscal transparency at the subnational level. Elevated levels of debt and fiscal prudence and its implications for FRBM, vertical devolution, macroeconomic stability. Then there is this issue of divisible versus non-divisible pool and fiscal equalization, and then I'll conclude. Now, if we talk about the present context and look at the way global economy is evolving, macroeconomic uncertainty is probably very high now, and a significant fallout of the pandemic is also increase in global debt. If we look at public debt, household debt, and non-financial private corporate debt, it's around 240% of global GDP. And if we just focus on public debt, you'll see, and this is from IMF's Fiscal Monitor 2023, that the global public debt reached at a level which was as high as 92% of GDP in 2021 after COVID, and we do see some reduction in debt, and now it is the global public debt is around 80-85% of GDP. So in terms of fiscal correction, what we see in India today and is also very similar to the trend in debt and deficit reduction observed after COVID across the globe. So this correction is not unique to India, it is happening globally. However, India also has seen impressive post-COVID growth and fiscal recovery. But if we look at India's public debt to GDP ratio, it's much higher than countries of similar level of income or EMEs. So among the EMEs, emerging market economies, India's public debt is one of the highest, so around 80-83% of GDP. So what is now we had before COVID a consensus view that by 23-24, based on the recommendation of the FRBM review committee, that the debt to GDP ratio will be brought down to 60% of GDP by 24-25. So today we are in the fiscal year 24-25, and we have a debt to GDP ratio as 82%. So if we talk about 16th Finance Commission, and its assessment of fiscal situation for the next 5 years. I think this new normal, where our debt to GDP ratio is almost 20%, more than 20 percentage point higher than what was supposed to be if there was no COVID, needs to be taken into consideration. So that's a new. So what is the medium term fiscal new normal for public debt in India? We don't have that number. And how India's debt to GDP ratio would be in the next 5 to 10 years is something that probably Finance Commission has to look at. What is the time frame to achieve that new normal is also something that we need to discuss, whether it can go beyond Finance Commission award period or it can be achieved within the award period of the 16th Finance Commission. Now, if we look at public sector debt deficit dynamics in India, the share of the subnational debt, I mean the state government debt, in combined debt of the union and state is around 35%. So 65% debt is union government debt. So however, the share of subnational deficit, if we look at in general government, that means taking the union and states together, fiscal deficit has a much larger share. So the stock and flow difference also requires an asymmetric approach to the management of debt and deficit. So if we say that state's fiscal deficit is 3 and debt to GDP ratio is 27% and center's fiscal deficit is 4.5 and the debt to GDP ratio is 57%, probably center would require a larger correction in their fiscal deficit compared to the states. But that is not the issue that we are discussing. We have been talking about specific states and their fiscal imbalances. So if we look at the general government, the fisc of the economy, the fiscal imbalance in the economy, I think the larger fiscal imbalance exists at the union level. Probably that has increased due to COVID, and so a larger correction is required at the union level as far as the debt ratio is concerned. Other important factor in this context is also the asymmetry in debt ratio across states and their effective management. So if we are talking about fiscal management across states, I think one size fits all fiscal management has never been considered as the most appropriate way to manage fisc. But at the same time, if we look at some of the states where the debt ratio is more than the average state debt to GDP ratio, and there are states where you will see that the debt to GDP ratio is far lower than the average debt to GDP ratio. So when you talk about a symmetric management of asymmetric fiscal balance, I think we have a serious challenge there. So how do you really have state-specific fiscal adjustment is something that we need to think about, because these ratios, that the difference between the lowest debt GDP ratio state and the highest debt GDP ratio state has actually widened in the last 4 or 5 years. So there has to be a differential fiscal management path across states. Probably we need to provide greater fiscal space to those states who have managed well, and try to create a framework of performance-based incentive for those states where the debt ratio is really high. So then the other issue is management of budget borrowing and contingent liabilities added to the complexity of the debt management. And how that data shows, I'll try to briefly put some of those state level data to understand what is happening on the as far as our budget liabilities are concerned. Improving the quality of fiscal deficit by reducing the share of revenue deficit in total fiscal deficit also remains a major post-COVID fiscal challenge. If we look at states where having a revenue surplus earlier, but they have got into all states, I'm talking about combined revenue deficit. Many states have actually having now revenue deficit. So how do we manage this increasing revenue deficit at the state level? Because that can also reduce the capital expenditure in the medium to long term. Now, if we look at the debt to GDP ratio of center and states, this is the combined debt to GDP ratio. The combined one is the green line. And then center, if you look at, as I mentioned, it's around, as I said, only one third of the debt is with the states and rest is with the center. So larger fiscal correction will have to happen at the central level. But there are states who have very high debt to GDP ratio from this average. And if we look at, now if we plot this large number of states in terms of their per capita nominal GDP and outstanding liabilities as a percentage of GDP, couple of things become very important. If we look at the first quadrant, the leftmost lower quadrant, you will see there are states who are at the bottom of the per capita, bottom ladder of the per capita income. So these are Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Orissa, and these states are also fiscally very prudent. So if you look at their debt to GDP ratio, they're lower than the all state average. For example, Orissa has a debt to GDP ratio which is less than 17-18% of GDP. Madhya Pradesh much lower than all state average. Chhattisgarh much lower than all state average. So these are income poor but fiscally rich states. So this graph shows states' outstanding debt and per capita income. As I mentioned, the lower quadrant on the leftmost side was we have the set of states who have got high per capita income, but low per capita income but also low debt to GDP ratio. And these states are like fiscally rich but income poor. Then we have Bihar, West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand, and Rajasthan, fiscally poor as well as income poor. Then we have Punjab, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and Haryana. These states are fiscally poor but income rich. And then we have Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, Telangana, and Karnataka. These are income rich and also fiscally rich states. So we have this diverse set of fiscal imbalance, and probably the issue of dealing with this asymmetry in terms of fiscal balance require an approach which cannot be uniform across states. So and my hypothesis is that if really we want to increase spending at the state level, and the states which are having very low level of per capita expenditure and high fiscal prudence, probably they need to increase spending. At the same time, when states which are income rich, probably they need to reduce their spending, have less revenue deficit, and improve their fiscal imbalances. So this asymmetry in fiscal balance across state is an important issue, and these asymmetries have actually increased after COVID. If we look at data pre-COVID and post-COVID, and then from that point of view, I think there is a need to look at these differences across this. How that has to be done, I really do not have a clear idea at this moment, but past Finance Commission actually have addressed this issue in terms of suggesting asymmetric path for fiscal adjustment. I think that becomes very important now because of these high differences in debt to GDP ratio across states. Now, if we look at outstanding liabilities and outstanding guarantees across states, so these are on the x-axis we have got outstanding guarantees, and then we have got the outstanding liabilities as a percentage of GSDP on the y-axis. And as you can see, the states, and if we draw a trend line, you will see that it is increasing. That means with increase in outstanding guarantees, the outstanding debt to GDP ratio is also increasing. So outstanding liabilities and outstanding guarantees relationship appears to be positive. So in other words, there are a lot of off-budget borrowing happening, which is not reflected in the fiscal deficit of the states, because this is not part of the fiscal deficit. The government might have given guarantees or allowed of budget borrowing to happen. And if we look at, it shows that states, the states with high debt to GDP ratio are also the states who are having higher of budget liabilities. So that's another issue that needs to be taken into consideration. So just looking at the fiscal deficit would really not give us an aggregate picture of what is happening to the outstanding guarantees and outstanding liabilities. Now, if we look at trend in expenditure, this is the trend in developed expenditure during COVID, and you can see that as a percentage of GDP, the capital outlay has increased much because of because of the increase in interest-free loans to the states and various other measures to push capital expenditure. But the issue here is that the total increase in expenditure in terms of capital outlay is around 3% of GDP. And if we look at the total capital outlay from the national accounts, it's around 3.7, 3.8% of GDP. So the large part of the capital expenditure is public capital investment is happening at the state level. So from that point of view also, if we are talking about fiscal imbalance after COVID, I think reduction in revenue deficit becomes an important target. So to be achieved in a time-bound manner at the state level. Now there has been a lot of discussions about your state's fiscal prudence, and there has been a lot of discussions about states are making spending which are not desirable, etc. But I just wanted to show you this graph, and this graph is of states and their fiscal deficit target for the year 21-22 after COVID, immediately after COVID. And if we look at this graph, you will see that there are only few states who have actually borrowed over and above the limit of that year. So, and these states are Assam, Kerala. Then we had some of the northeastern states who have very small budget size, so it's not going to influence fiscal deficit at the aggregate level in a significant way. And then we had Telangana at 4.1% of GDP. So the kind of fiscal contraction that we are talking about, but fiscal imbalance we are talking about, I don't see that happening if we look at data really from the state side. And states have been, in general, taking all the states together, manage their finances well, even after COVID. So, and now in this context, when we see a high debt to GDP ratio, asymmetry in the debt to GDP ratio across states, emergence of revenue deficit, and then the emergence and rising of budget liabilities, which is impacting the debt ratio. What are the issues before the 16th Finance Commission? I think post-COVID fiscal stance, if we look at, and there is a sharp reduction in deficit, as we mentioned. However, debt of both the union and states remain at an elevated level. Increase in capital expenditure at the general government level due to the reintroduction of the on-lending program to the state is seen in our data. In my understanding, it should be priced and linked to the revenue deficit reduction of states. States in aggregate have managed to achieve significant fiscal consolidation. However, there are fiscally stressed states having large deficit and debt, and these states probably require more consolidation in the medium term. So what are the issues? So I think there are three critical issues that probably the Finance Commission will have to take into consideration. One is a flexible fiscal framework focused on capital expenditure. And it should also provide a framework to deal with off-budget borrowing and liabilities of the states. And a harmonized guarantee management law will be critical for greater fiscal transparency. A harmonized guarantee management law means states should, if we look at FRBM Act, every state FRBM Act has a guarantee management provisions, and these provisions are not uniform across states. In some states, the guarantee is given in absolute amount, say 1,400 crore every year or 14,000 crore every year. In some states, it is as a percentage of GDP. In some states, it is as a percentage of their own revenue. Some states, it is as a percentage of total revenue expenditure. So we really do not have comparative understanding of the guarantee management, the level of guarantee given by the states. So if the Finance Commission can provide a framework of harmonized guarantee management, that would bring in a lot of clarity in what is happening at the state level in terms of budget borrowing. Now, there has also been a major discussion about interstate fund flow and horizontal liquidity. I think whenever Finance Commission comes, there is always this discussion about who is gaining and who is losing out, what has happened in the past, etc. So I thought I'll speak about interstate fund flow and the horizontal inequality in the Indian federal system. This is the data that I have collected from the Finance Commission reports. So if we look at the ranking of states, this is based on comparable GSDP provided by the Finance Commissions. So I compared the 12th and 15th Finance Commission ranking. So I would just like to draw your attention to a state, say Kerala and Haryana. Haryana's ranking in the 15th FC award, comparable GSDP ranking. So this data is comparable across over the years. So base etc. does not really impact. This comparison. So if we look at Haryana had a ranking of 4. Haryana's ranking was 4, and it has Haryana became the second highest per capita income state during the 15th FC award. Similarly, Kerala, which was the fifth highest per capita income states, now it is third highest. As for the 15th FC, is the third highest per capita income states. And if you look at Karnataka, it was 8th, it has become 4th. And if you look at Punjab, which once upon a time used to be the second, has become the 9th in per capita income ranking across states. So this per capita income ranking is not fixed, it has been continuously changing, and a lot of change that you see is happening at the among the middle income states. So the states which were middle income, that actually some of them have become high income states, and some of the high income states have become middle income states like Punjab. But if we look at the ranking of the low income states, and starting from say Odisha to Chhattisgarh, Odisha's ranking has increased. But if you look at Chhattisgarh to Bihar, I think the ranking really hasn't changed much, and except that West Bengal's ranking has declined from 10 to 13. I think the states at the bottom ladder of the per capita income, I think remain more or less unaltered in last 25 years. So we have a situation where a set of high income states, their ranking is changing because some of the middle income states have moved as high income into the high income category, and then some of the high income states slipped into the middle income category. But the bottom, 4-5 states actually haven't shown any change in their per capita income in the last 25 years. Now, this brings a very complex issue in the this is a very complex issue for the Finance Commission to deal with. So, and if we keep this ranking in mind, and if we look at the way horizontal devolution has happened, probably it would show why it has happened the way it has happened. So before I get into the horizontal distribution across states, I also wanted to briefly mention about what determines horizontal distribution. I am sure you are aware of it, but just for the purpose of completeness, I wanted to highlight this. I think there exists considerable heterogeneity among states in terms of their size, population, per capita income, fiscal capacity, etc. And if we look at successive FCs, so we have taken data from 11th to 15th FC, final report. And if we look at, they can be categorized in 3 broad categories. One is need and cost disability, and by need and cost disability, I mean population, which is a neutral indicator of need because it does not make a distinction between people residing in Tamil Nadu and people residing in Arunachal Pradesh. Then we have area of the state, demographic changes, and the forest cover. These are need and cost disability because forest cover is a cost disability. Then we have equity criteria, which is income distance, infrastructure distance used by the 11th Finance Commission, fiscal capacity distance used by the 13th Finance Commission, and then we have set of indicators which actually talked about efficiency and performance, like tax effort, fiscal discipline, demographic performance. So we had these 3 broad set of indicators to reflect need and cost disability, equity, and efficiency. Now, if we look at need, which is generally reflected in the income distance of a state from the highest per capita income state, that share of need actually has declined in the total devolution from 70% during the 11th Finance Commission award to 45% in the during the 15th Finance Commission Award. So in other words, an indicator which directly reflects differences in fiscal capacity actually has seen a decline over the years. In other words, if the 11th Finance Commission's income distance was continued by the 15th Finance Commission, transfer would have been more progressive than what it is today. In other words, and what has replaced this equity principle? This equity principle has been, equity criteria has been replaced by more neutral indicators of need. So neutral indicators and needs are like population, area, demographic change, forest cover. So these are not an exact measure of fiscal capacity, but a need which does not differentiate between people residing in two different states with different kind of per capita income and fiscal capacity. So this highly progressive distribution principle has been the impact of highly progressive distribution principle has been replaced by more neutral indicators of need like population, area, demographic change, and forest cover. So, and in the process, what the outcome that we got can be seen from here, from this table. Give me a minute, I'll just explain this table. It's a bit complicated. So per capita income ranking. So this is the first column. If you look at, it shows per capita income ranking, and every finance commission how this 5 top per capita income ranking changed is shown there. So if you look at the 11th FC, Goa, Punjab, Maharashtra, Haryana, and Himachal Pradesh were the top 5 per capita income states, and they had a share of 8.152%. Now, if we look at 15th FC, Goa, Sikkim, Haryana, Kerala, and Karnataka are the top 5 per capita income states. And if we look at these top 5 per capita income states, their share actually declined from 8.152 to 7.439. So in other words, the share of top 5 income states, and the top 5 is changing every time, so in the last 20 years actually shown a decline in from 8.152 to 7.439. So that should say that would imply that transfer has become more progressive because the high income state share has been declining. But if we look at the share of middle 13, 14 states, and if you look at it, their share also has not increased. In fact, it has declined. So middle the states at the bottom 10 to 9 states. If you look at Arunachal, Madhya Pradesh, Meghalaya, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Assam, Jharkhand, Odisha, and Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. The combined share of these states was 57-58%, and in the 15th FC their share has come down to 54%. Though the numbers, the names of the states have changed in this category. So what is happening? That the top 5 income state share is declining, has declined. Bottom 10 states share has declined. But and if we look at the middle income states, so we have in the 11th we had Kerala, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Mizoram, Sikkim, Karnataka, Nagaland, Tripura, Andhra, and Uttarakhand. They had 34% in the total devolution. That has increased to 37.866%. So what we see in the last 20 years is that there is a redistribution happening, and that a redistribution of devolution happening, and this redistribution of devolution is happening from rich to the middle, not from rich to the poor. So that's the story of redistribution. So neutrality in fact introducing more and more neutral indicators of need in the devolution formula with a reduction in the share of income distance, which is the most progressive component of devolution, actually has seen redistribution happening towards middle income states, not from the poorer states. In other words, I think there's a threshold that has been already decided that redistribution has its political limit. So probably we cannot redistribute beyond 54-55% to the bottom 10 states. Then there will be a lot of tension in the federal fiscal system. And we need to also redistribute income from the richer to the other regions. And in this process, the way Finance Commission devolution formula has evolved actually benefited the middle income states. I'm not making a value judgment, but redistribution in terms of equity actually remains suboptimal if we look at last 20 years. Now, vertical transfer and fiscal stability. Now, we are talking about transfer to states and union budget. If we look at vertical transfer, we have been talking about how much money center is spending to the states, a proliferation of cess and surcharges, reduction of increase in non-divisible pool because cess and surcharges are not divisible with the states, etc. And if we look at the total transfer as a percentage of GDP, actually is around 6.5 to 6 around 7% of GDP. It's more or less constant. It hasn't changed. What has changed is probably the steady upward increase in grants to the states in the form of centrally sponsored scheme. So in other words, my hypothesis would be that center is not really unwilling to give money to the states, but center certainly is not willing to give money in an untied form. So despite 42% devolution, I think overall transfers in the form of grants have gone up, and tax devolution as a percentage of GDP is around 3.17, 3.3% of GDP, despite increase in devolution by the Finance Commission. 15th Finance Commission time, it has increased from 3.68 to 4.03. After that there was COVID, but it is now much lower than what it was in the year 2018-19, that is just before COVID. Even in 2019-20 there was a contraction, but overall if we look at tax devolution as a percentage of GDP has come down, but grant as a percentage of GDP has gone up, and overall transfer remained at around 6.5, 6.8% of GDP. So that's the overall story of transfer. And if we talk about fiscal inequality and public investment, and I just draw your attention to the fact that fiscal equalization through the mechanism of Finance Commission transfer and non-Finance Commission grant is limited to revenue expenditure of states. Finance Commission does not give money for capital expenditure at the state level. So if the Finance Commission gives money only to equalize revenue expenditure, and the capital expenditure will have to be financed by borrowing, then there is a cap on capital expenditure because there is a cap on borrowing because of the FRBM Act. So from that point of view, we really need to think of an alternative mechanism to finance capital expenditure of poorer states. There is no explicit mechanism also in India to equalize public capital investment through union budget, except the recent interest-free loans given to the states by the union. But that's a very small amount, and this also has the possibility of, that's a very, very small amount, and this also has the possibility of replacing states' own revenue expenditure, own capital expenditure. Because it's interest free and has no incentive for the states. It does not provide an incentive for the states to actually enhance capital expenditure by reducing revenue deficit. So that's why I was mentioning in the beginning that it should be priced rather than making it free, because this can substitute to states' own capital expenditure. Now, if we look at interest share between the 12th and 15th FC, there is a lot of discussion about, north, south, rich versus poor, etc. The issue of continuous decline in devolution is restricted to few states. One is Kerala, share has declined very sharply. Karnataka, share has declined very sharply. Tamil Nadu, the share has declined. Andhra Pradesh, undivided, if we look at taking both Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, there has been a decline. And then Odisha share has declined, Assam share has declined, Uttar Pradesh and Bihar share also has declined. So when we are talking about horizontal distribution, we also have to look at, along with some of the high income states, to states who are at the bottom of the per capita income of India, their share also has declined sharply in the last 25 years. So the lot of redistribution that we are talking about is benefiting the middle income states. And this is also related to the kind of change in income ranking that we saw when you compared per capita income of richer states and per capita income of states. So finally, I would like to conclude by saying a couple of emerging issues. One is on the plan-non-plan distinction and its implication for public investment management at the state level. Increase in devolution made large part of the union transfers untied, which benefited all the states. Because of the increase in the non-divisible pool, the tax devolution as a percentage of GDP actually hasn't really increased after 1819. Due to the elimination of planned and non-planned distinctions, states with large deficit were also able to receive revenue deficit grants. There is a need to look at both tax devolution and grants. This is directly linked to fiscal risk management at the state level. And there is also a need to develop a mechanism to create fiscal space for capital spending, as I mentioned. And a discussion on divisible pool and non-divisible pool is necessary. Why it is necessary? Because what is divisible is all the taxes collected minus cess, the charges and cost of collection. We have been discussing about proliferation of cess and surcharges by the union to finance centrally sponsored scheme or to finance its own expenditure. But another area of non-divisible pool is non-tax revenue, the kind of RBI profit that is financing center's revenue deficit, the kind of 2G kind of spectrum revenues that the union government is getting because of the technology and changes in the way economy functions, digitization, etc., have actually increased center's fiscal space but hasn't benefited the states. Third is also the issue of the issue of disinvestment process. A lot of states have this idea about this complaint about since these disinvestment proceeds are also are financing capital receipts of the union government, but it's located in states. What about the land value? What about the opportunity cost that state had to incur? So should there be a framework? Shouldn't there be a framework to decide how this disinvestment proceed, whether the disinvestment proceeds should be shared between the union and state? So it is not only cess and surcharges, it is also about increasing fiscal space because the way economy has changed and that benefited center in terms of gaining a lot of non-tax revenue. And then there has been these big important discussions about and a big thrust about asset monetization, etc. And these are going to have going to benefit the centers more than the state. So in a context like this, I think it is given the changing nature of the economy and the revenue gain that state center is having, unilateral revenue gain that the center is having because of that, need appropriate review by the Finance Commission, and the Finance Commission should suggest a framework how this should be shared between the union and the states. I think since Finance Commission make only transfers to equalize revenue expenditure of states, which means primarily social sector expenditure and some expenditure on economic services, I think we need to make a difference between the strategic needs with fiscal implications and fiscal expenditure need for socio-economic development. A state-specific capital investment grant fund may help in this regard. There are state-specific issues, and those things cannot be resolved by a devolution formula. So if there are state-specific grants for those issues in terms of cost disability, migration, etc., those things should be done by the union. But if we are talking about trying to resolve these issues through the devolution formula, it may not happen. We need, since our debt to GDP, finally, when our debt to GDP ratio is very high, there should be a clear plan to bring it down from its current level of 27% of GDP in the next 5 years to at least 22%, to create fiscal space for development spending, because interest payment to GSDP ratio is also very high. The new FRBM framework needs to focus on reduction of revenue deficit and debt ratio to enhance fiscal space for capital spending. So I stop at that. And since high inflation can knock off debt, target debt to GDP ratio as a part of the FRBM framework of states as well as union. A time-bound elimination of revenue deficit to improve fiscal balance will help augment capital expenditure. As I said in the beginning, redesigning of on-lending program to improve fiscal prudence at the state level would help. And for greater fiscal transparency, the public financial management system should focus on creating data on public sector borrowing requirement. We have seen a lot of tensions between center and states about the borrowing limit of states. I think if we are talking about off-budget borrowing, guarantees, etc., and then 3% is not going to work. Then in that case, if we are actually targeting public sector borrowing requirement by reducing state government borrowing, I think that's probably is not fair. So in that context, I think you need to have data on PSBR, and if you really want to be fiscally transparent, should have a PSBR target rather than the fiscal deficit target. The medium-term debt reduction strategy requires a quantified path of debt and debt reduction at the union and state level, which we do not have at the moment, and develop a harmonized guarantee framework for fiscal transparency and to reduce off-budget fiscal risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pinaki, for a very excellent exposition of the issues that are there before 16th Finance Commission. I think you have raised very pertinently that a center requires large corrections compared to the states, and there is asymmetry across states, that states debt to GDP ratio is more in few states and lesser in other states, but this also has widened across states. And also there is a kind of, from the richer states to that of the medium states, there is a transition from that of the richer states to that of the medium states. And also regarding the off-budget liabilities also. So maybe one or two, I think, participants here would be also interested to raise some issues. But there is also that the states are raising the FRBM limits. Sometimes they are revising these FRBM limits, and then there are special corporations set up for the welfare needs against guarantees. So that's also happening across the states. And the three critical issues that you have raised is that before the 16th Finance Commission, having to work on towards flexible fiscal framework and a framework for off-budget borrowing and harmonized guarantee. I think these are important issues that you have raised, and moreover about the horizontal distribution also, where it's from equity to that of neutral kind of indicators that are there. I think there are, the participants would be really interested to ask some questions. Also, our center has done this study for evaluation of finances for the state of Andhra Pradesh for the 16th Finance Commission, and also the State Finance Commission has awarded a study for the state of Telangana. In this context, I request Professor Gopinath to reflect, and others also to reflect on these issues.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, sir, for very elaborate exposition of the kind of issues before the 16th Finance Commission. I'm not student of public finance directly, but I do have some little bit of knowledge on local finances. So from that perspective, probably I would like to raise one or two big issues. One is the issue of tied and untied grants that you are talking about. When it comes to the local bodies, local finances, we could see that now it is 60% of tied and 40% of untied. Even during 15th Finance Commission grants that we got to the local bodies. The money is huge, certainly. It has risen from 14th Finance Commission onwards, particularly after that 41% of money that is coming from divisible pool. That is 14th Finance Commission headed by Y.V. Reddy was very radical. So huge money is coming, but unfortunately it is a tied money which is coming and untied is only 40%. Now I just wanted to know your opinion whether that kind of alteration, tied untied, can you give to the any scope to state government per se, instead of center fixing up the kind of tied untied? That's one issue. And another issue probably is very important. I think you are very well aware of this probably, but then I think it hasn't come up in your presentation. Right, sir? The population criteria, which is a huge now population criteria for distribution of funds from center to state, even to the local bodies, it is 90-10%. 10% is area, 90% is population. So now I know you are aware the South Indian states are definitely disadvantaged. I think it's becoming an important issue for South Indian states to rally around. The kind of injustice because of the very effective population control measures, whether it's in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, even to some extent Andhra Pradesh, United Andhra Pradesh, and we have very less population, growth rates. I think as a result of this, we are getting affected, and North Indian states like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and all, they are getting disproportionately higher incomes. Of course, the logic is different that we have to always favor the poorer states. That logic goes, but then how do you account for the state measures for population control? Now our Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister went to the extent of saying that we need more, we have to produce more children. Is this a kind of logic? The person who has effectively controlled the population during his earlier regime of 90s, today he goes exactly in reverse. And today we saw in newspaper, RSS chief Bhagat also compliments what Chakraborthy. I think it's becoming a very, very delicate issue. What is your take on this? Thank you, sir.
For these two very important questions, not that I have an answer, but I'll try. One is tired versus untired. Yes, I think the 15th Finance Commission actually made transfer to local bodies really very much dependent on fulfillment of various conditionalities. In turn, I think it has impacted absorption. So I was looking at some data which shows that the absorption is particularly low in poorer states and in northeastern and hilly states. I think 60% of the money going in because the Finance Commission has to, because the states will have to fulfill certain conditions, actually resulted in low absorption. That's initial data that is available from Janagraha and city finance portal. If we look at, it's very evident. So there needs to be a right balance as far as local government finances are concerned, right balance of tied and untied grant as far as local finance transfer is concerned from the center to the, not center, from the Finance Commission to the states. But Finance Commission had a different logic because some of these conditions were to incentivize states to constitute state finance commissions. I think that was the entry level condition that they put, and only 6 states actually had finance commissions. 6 or 7 states had their 5th or 6th finance commission when they were in office. When the rest of the states did not have some of the states did not even have their 2nd or the 1st finance commission. So that was the kind of framework in which this was done. But though the intention probably was good, but it did not result in appropriate absorption of fund. That's one. Second issue, I think, is becoming very complex. Is this condition? Is this idea about? Is this condition where the Finance Commission said that property tax revenue should grow at the rate of growth of GSDP. So it should be equal to the rate of growth of GSDP. I think that has happened in the last 2-3 years, but since property tax is an immobile tax, so linking it to GSDP's growth rate is something that's not going to be easy to fulfill in the long run, because it does GSDP growth rate and property tax revenue growth rate, that link is all the time is not very clear, because it's after all not a consumption tax, it's a tax on a immobile property. So if it is an immobile tax base, I think linking it with a flow called income was conceptually not right. On the question, so I think there is a need to relook at the way the framework of Finance Commission grant was proposed and implemented after the Commission's recommendations are accepted by the Government of India. So 16th Finance Commission must have a relook at it. So the second issue is the population criteria. I think population criteria is an extremely complex issue, not that I have a very definite answer on this, but I'll raise a couple of issues. First is, yes, what about 1971 versus 2011 population? I think 1971 population was not used by the 11th, but 15th, but 15th also have used demographic performance indicator, which is the inverse of fertility rate, which was the difference between 1971 and 2011 population. This was also to rebalance the fiscal transfer because of the introduction of 2011 population and consequent loss, major loss to some of the states. So that's the Finance Commission tried to rebalance it. Third issue, I think when you talk about population, I think population share has been coming down. Income share is going up. Income distance is also coming down. It's replaced by forest and some other indicators of demographic performance, like demographic change by 2011 by 14th and 15th demographic performance, inverse of fertility. Now if I really don't think, if we look at data very carefully, I really don't think that the states that has seen significant decline in their share was because of the move from 1971 to 2011 population. That's because these states have actually gained very significantly in the income distance. So is income distance the appropriate indicator of measuring fiscal capacity? I think is more important question rather than the population criteria. Third issue is, why should we actually ask Finance Commission to use a particular reference population? That's the question. How Finance Commission would measure fiscal capacity should be determined by the Finance Commission. Unfortunately, in India, we use a proxy, which is income distance, to measure fiscal capacity. So if there are some better ways to measure fiscal capacity, where we do not have to depend on population, yet we'll be able to truly understand what the differences in fiscal capacity across states, I think that kind of a measure would be more important rather than this extremely sensitive issue like population. Last issue on population I would like to highlight. I'm not saying that the states don't need resources, big states don't need resources. Last issue that I wanted to highlight, if a state is more populous and the Finance Commission is trying to estimate fiscal need of that state, can it use a dated population, which is 50 years old? So we are actually penalizing a state because it is poor as well as it has got more population. So from that point of view, I think 2011 population was a better measure compared to using 1971 population. But this has also resulted in the reduction in the horizontal devolution to some of the states which have made significant progress in population transition, fertility transition. So in order to balance that, we see this indicator of demographic performance in the devolution formula. And as I said, if we compare the devolution share of some of the most popular states where population has grown in the last 75 years, you will see the share of those states, as I showed in my graph, has declined, both for UP and Bihar. The share has also declined. So it's a mixed story. I think there's so many factors are there. which is determining ultimately that outcome, state-specific number of horizontal devolution. I think this decline cannot just be attributed to the population number. We need to look at what has happened to the income ranking, because it has got the highest share. Now even after a decline, it has got 45% share. So this needs to be seen by taking into consideration all the factors that are there that determine the horizontal devolution.
Thank you very much, sir, for insightful session. I am Praveen, first year PhD scholar. Sir, my question is, 15th Finance Commission recommended the divisible share 41% to the states and 1% for the newly formed union territories, which is very much similar to 14th Finance Commission. But many states now demanding 50% of share from the divisible pool, sir. Is it necessary to increase from 41% to 50%? Could you please throw some light on this demand from many states?
Well, I don't want to, propose or recommend a number, but what is most important is when the Finance Commission assesses vertical fiscal gap, is the requirement of resources of the union government, of all the states, and some money that is required for the concurrent list function where both union and states operate. Now, if you look at over time, the money that union is spending on state and concurrent list subjects have increased. So in that context, I think there is a need to restructure centrally sponsored scheme. And if we don't do that, even if we increase the vertical devolution to 50%, the cess and surcharges will go up, effective devolution will be lower. That is one. Second point is, when we talk about 42% was to cover both planned and non-planned revenue expenditure of the states. After that, there are a couple of changes. One is state share going up in CESS, normal central assistance, discontinuation of normal central assistance to the states, couple of centrally sponsored schemes going away, and also introduction of GST. All these changes have actually reduced the untied fiscal space very significantly. So in that context, I think there is certainly a scope for increasing the vertical devolution, but what that level would be is a matter of assessment. It can be 50, it can be more than 50, it can be less than 50 also. So I really do not know that number.
Thank you very much, sir. Very insightful and data-based presentation on the issues before the Finance Commission. I have two simple questions. One is the expanding share of non-divisible pool, okay, of the resources. So do you think there's a need to, I mean, it can go on expanding, or is there a need to kind of put a cap on non-divisible pool? Because that has been a complaint particularly from the South Indian states. Then second point, the governance of the Finance Commission, like the formula, adopted by the commission is, kind of terms of reference, and the grievances or complaints of different state governments, mostly South Indian and non, BJP or opposition ruled states, has been that, the recommendations of the commissions are not been implemented in toto, or there's a lag, in implementing the recommendations. So in case of any kind of conflict or, a deviation from the implementation, then is there any mechanism to, address the issues raised by different state governments, to really to kind of make the recommendation binding on Government of India, or any need for a mechanism, for kind of, addressing grievances raised with different state governments? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. for your question. On the question of non-divisible pool, actually there is no framework available that can really put a cap on the share on the volume of non-divisible. It's not shareable anyway. It is not shared now also. And there is so what I was trying to propose was to actually ask Finance Commission by the states to create a framework which would tell us why it is important to share non-divisible pool of resources, be it non-tax revenue, cess surcharges, etc. Successive finance commissions have recommended that cess and surcharges constitution should be amended and cess and surcharges should form part of the divisible pool, but that hasn't happened. Now, if the center is disproportionately gaining because of the rising non-tax revenue, which are not shareable, non-tax revenue are not shareable, but disproportionately gaining because of changing nature of the economy, because nobody thought 30 years back there will be spectrum revenues. Nobody thought 30 years back RBI transfer will be so high. So this is actually giving excess fiscal space to the center, in turn increasing centrally sponsored schemes. So the center is intervening more and more in state subject and reducing states' fiscal space, because states also have to make matching contribution. So what is the implication of center's higher fiscal space on state level fiscal autonomy? Needs appropriate consideration, and that should be discussed by the Finance Commission, and the framework suggested why it is not appropriate to continuously increase CSS and then reduce state's fiscal space. That's the first point that I wanted to raise. So at the moment there no cap can be put, and nothing is possible as far as preventing center from getting more and more doing more and more CSS through this increase in large revenues to the from the non-divisible part of the resources. So that's the first point. Second point I wanted to say is yes, there is no mechanism which decides or consults states when it comes to the implementation of the FC's recommendations. But in principle, all the recommendations have been accepted. But there is no study that actually shows. This is something which is very important to look at. What has happened to various recommendations other than tax devolution and grants to the states. FRBM, of course, was proposed by FCs, which was implemented, but FC had made many sectoral recommendations, sectoral reform measures, and those things have not been implemented. So why it has not been implemented, and or is there a framework that we can really think of? So I do not know. The last point probably I would say in this context is also the issue of this issue of capital account versus revenue account. Now, since FCs are only concerned about revenue account equalization, as I mentioned in the beginning, I think capital account is left uncovered through a support mechanism of grants. And if we really do not have that, and in the absence of planning and planning commission, because planning commission earlier used to give loans to the states to make capital expenditure, it has become now that the planned grants are not there, it has become completely dependent on the revenue deficit of the states and the borrowing limit that is provided by the center through the FRBM Act. So in that context also, I think it is very important to create a capital grant framework and this is also linked to the non-divisible pool. That's the point I was trying to make.
Thank you for the informative session, sir. My question is 16th Finance Commission has made it a performance-based grants. Already the poor states are not getting the sufficient amount to improve, as they included the performance-based grants, which is incentives, right? So how the poor states are going to improve their performance to get the incentives from the Finance Commission or from the center? And what are your suggestions to overcome the challenges of poor states? Thank you.
The last point.
She is asking your suggestion for overcome poorer states to overcome their conditions to get a better kind of grants from the center.
Okay. Yeah, with respect to Finance Commission grant, it actually is a very small part of the total transfer that Finance Commission makes. It's very small. 90% of the devolution is transfer is in the form of tax devolution. So and if you look at the 14th Finance Commission report, 14th Finance Commission said that 14th Finance Commission was not giving any conditional grant. So that's very important to consider. The conditions are mostly with respect to CESS, and that's the central scheme. That has got nothing to do with that. Finance Commission. Finance Commission does not propose CESS. So from that point of view, I think what we need is more flexible design of CESS, where CESS can be absorbed, because Finance Commission's tax devolution formula, there is no condition attached to it. 90% of the money goes to the tax devolution. So what we need is a reform of CESS, not the problem is not much as far as the Finance Commission grant is concerned. Of course, local body grant is an issue, but that forms a very small part of the total money that Finance Commission transfers.
I am Dr. Arifa Sultana here, sir, working at CESS. My question is, what impact does corruption have on India's public debt? Thank you.
Oh, I don't know, because I haven't looked at it. Yeah. Fiscal imbalance increases public debt. And how fiscal imbalance is linked to corruption is something which is a very complex issue. I have no idea.
So only one last question from my side is that you've categorized states into fiscally poor and income rich, in which category fall Punjab, AP, and these states. And also, you have said that the outstanding guarantees and outstanding liabilities, there is a positive correlation between these two. And we know that their liabilities are also increasing along with outstanding. So is it because of the welfare kind of expenditure that the states are taking up, that the states, it's making them fiscally poor despite income rich? And because we have some kind of states also, setting up some corporations against budget kind of guarantees and then spending more for the welfare. So how do you see this? And moreover, states also, the capital expenditure is not, it's not there from the Finance Commission. So between the capital expenditure and the welfare spending, how do you see the fiscal stress of these states?
Okay, thank you. I think this question of welfare spending, weakening state finances need more understanding, more analysis, more nuanced view. That's I haven't really looked at it very carefully, but I think one of the issues that actually is creating major fiscal risk at the state level will be power sector subsidies. And power sector subsidies are not something that has happened yesterday. Power sector problems are there for the last almost 25 years. So we have APDRP 1, then APDRP 2, then we had APDRP 3, then we had Uday, then all kinds of reforms were done in power sector to reduce their losses. That hasn't happened. Now, and that will be the large chunk of, rising fiscal imbalance, outstanding guarantees that we see a positive relationship between debt and outstanding guarantees. So that's one issue. Second issue is, this discussion about freebies, these, that, and all that. I think this is an issue of subsidy versus transfers, right? Some of the transfers are extremely important. We cannot brand all the transfers that they are bad, it should not be given. Or all subsidies are bad, should be stopped. I think that's not, and that's going to improve everything overnight because we have stopped all this. I think that's not going to work. Third issue I think is very important. Redistributive expenditures are at the state level. Union government, union list, if you look at, it has got hardly any redistributive spending. Most of the redistributive expenditure which impact household is at the state level. So state expenditure by nature will be redistributive. So once we control for these things, and if we look at that some states are really making profligate spending, then there is a case. But to say that, because states are spending in welfare, because states are spending in something which is not desirable, that is why fiscal, whether it is right or wrong, that kind of a nuanced, detailed, critical analysis is not yet available. I think we are talking about an announcement and then saying that this is going to cost this much. Whether the state has actually spent, that also needs to be seen. So what has happened in the last 5 years? Secondly, globally, if we look at, given that household debt is going up after COVID, because households have their budgets at big strain, can we really think of the government not supporting the poorer households at this point in time? So redistribution is a natural outcome of after the COVID shock. So we have to control for all this. When we are talking about, it is wrecking state finances, something drastic has to be done. I am not saying that we should encourage fiscal profligacy, but I think when we say that it is doing harm to the state finances, we also really need to look at in what way, quantify it, and then establish it. Without that, it will be unfair to say that all the subsidy and transfers are, bad and should be stopped. That's my view.
We thank you very much for giving us a very stimulating lecture, and also the highlighting the issues before the 16th Finance Commission, key fiscal challenges. And we should really thank you. And I especially mentioned Dr. Y.V. Reddy for facilitating us this talk by Dr. Pinaki. And I thank him, and I thank you for accepting it a very short notice and giving this lecture and clarifying all the doubts raised by the faculty and PhD scholars. Thank you once again. And
thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you for accommodating my request to come online. I'm sorry I could not come down to Hyderabad today. Thank you.
Thank you. We look forward for many more lectures from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.